Hello. It is time for our special fireside chat. I'm really sorry for the folks standing in the room. This is at capacity, but it just reflects the interest that we have. So as you've heard today, we need entrepreneurial, thoughtful, bold leaders, leaders who are going to look to improve the lives of 40 million Californians and to serve as strategic partners more broadly. We have three amazing leaders for you for this special fireside chat. First, I'd like to welcome my boss, Dr. Jennifer Chase, founding dean of the UC Berkeley College of Computing, Data Science, and Society. Okay. Next, we have the godmother of AI, Dr. Fei Li, Denning co-director of Stanford Human-Centered AI Institute, and the governor of our great state of California, Governor Gavin Newsom. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. All right. Godmother. How do you like that?
You know, I've been asked that question. I would never call myself that way, but there's so many men who are called godfathers of AI. I think I should just accept this.
Accept that. I like that. I like that.
Totally.
And by the way, I mean, I know most people know you, Dr. Lee, but for those that don't know you, why do some refer to you as the godmother of AI?
Wow, what a question. Well, I think, first of all, it means I'm old. Compared to, everybody think how young AI is. But I guess I belong to a small number of computer scientists. Some of them come from California who have brought in the modern age of AI, especially the three converging forces: big data, neural network algorithm, and hardware, especially GPUs. And many of them happen in California, including my own work.
Including your own work. And Dr. Chase, well, how did you get into this racket in the first place?
Oh, long story. I started off as a physicist and mathematician, and then after 10 years at UCLA as a mathematician, went to Microsoft for 23 years and founded AI labs in the Northeast and in Canada and in Israel. And after 23 years at Microsoft, I really felt like I had to go back to academia and help to create the education that we needed, and especially help to create the workforce that we needed so that it would better serve us. So that it was our own voices and the voices of our communities that would be represented.
Love it. So I know everybody, and thank you all for being here, and I know there have been a number of panels, including the labor panel, which is incredibly important, just prior to this, and a big focus of our executive order that we advanced many months back was focusing on displacement, focusing on training, focusing on workflows and workforce and inclusion and equity and the like. I mean, where are you guys on the spectrum in terms of those issues? I mean, I was just down in Palo Alto yesterday. Lorene Powell Jobs was hosting a convening around democracy, and invariably the issue of AI came up because the issues of truth and trust, disinformation, misinformation, promise, peril, and this whole notion that if we lose trust, we lose those bonds that unite us together, we lose our democracy. Where are you in sort of the spectrum of concern and growing consciousness?
I'm happy to start. I want to start with a little anecdote most people don't know. 5 years ago, 2019, Stanford University leadership and many faculty, some of them are in the audience, started, I think, the country's first human-centered AI institute. And I still remember March was our opening conference, and Governor Gavin Newsom was the closing keynote of that day.
I was only $1, so you got me for cheap.
those of us who were in the audience remember, we're talking about 2019. It was still before GenAI, before ChatGPT. AI was just starting to take off. Governor came and gave a 45-minute speech without a single shred of paper. And you talked about from the technology to workforce to bias to democracy. It was one of the most stunning speeches without preparation. And the undergrads
This is being recorded, right?
the undergrads were so in awe of you. So the reason I say this is because these issues we're still grappling today. We together foresaw that's coming, but I have to say, even as an AI scientist, I did not know the tsunami of Gen AI that would hit us, that about 2 years ago. So where are we with these issues? I think we have a very strong stance, especially coming from Stanford HAI, that we believe AI has to augment people. It cannot replace people. It's not a technology that should take away our collective prosperity as well as individual dignity. And so we've been working really hard on that, right? Advocating for technology that augments, whether it's our doctors, our teachers, our creators, and everybody in the society. I think we are also concerned, especially the potential societal risks this technology has a potential to give us. There is a lot of debate. I don't know, Governor, if you're aware of this whole, human extinction level, crisis. I actually think that's missing the point. That debate is more sci-fi. That is less relevant to today's social crisis that AI could potentially bring to us, whether it's democracy because of mis and disinformation, or labor market shift, or bias and privacy issues. I think these are much more real problems that a lot of our multi-stakeholders in this audience are really working so hard on.
That's interesting. I mean, do you think that gets in number one, do you share that point of view? And if you do share that point of view, is the danger in that then our eyes off the ball and we're not solving for today and tomorrow's problems?
So I am also on that side of it. I really feel that that Gen AI can be a great democratizer if we make sure that we empower everyone to be able to use Gen AI to solve their problems, the problems of their communities. And in so doing, we will find where it's going off track, because there must always be a human in the loop as we solve our problems of our communities with our workers driving that. There will be people in the loop. There will be workers. There will be customers who are receiving those goods and services. And we will see when it's going off track. And I also believe that we really, really need to educate at scale. I mean, we just formed our new College of Computing, Data Science, and Society a year ago. We had our first graduating class in May, a couple of weeks ago, and we graduated 2,246 students. 1/4 of the undergraduates in Berkeley graduated with a computer science, data science, or statistics degree. Wow. And the applications for this coming year were up by 48%. So we are and many of these students come in interested in public service in other areas. So, they're not just coming in to be in the tech industry. They're coming in and realizing that computing, AI, Gen AI can empower them to be public servants, to work in criminal justice, to work in climate change. So I think that if we enable them to do this, and if we actually go beyond the University of California and even the Cal State system, and really partner with the community college system, yes, totally. This is going to be the great empowerer for the state. I really do.
So what is the state of the state from your perspective? And I mean more broadly, as it relates to the anxiety that some of us have that we just don't know what we don't know. That we have a regulatory mindset that we want to make up for the mistakes we made in the past in terms of social media. If we could do that all over again, let's not make that mistake today. That said, doesn't seem like the incentives are necessarily aligned in a competitive free enterprise system. People to voluntarily pull back and self-regulate when we have open source. You turn on 4chan and all of a sudden Meta's large language models are up and available, and there's a hyper-competitiveness. I was just over in the East Bay with a delegation, former Governor Brown, and by the way, pleased to be here with former Governor Davis as well. It's my gubernatorial day, 2 out of the 3 living governors in our midst. And we were talking about the other Pandora's box that's been open on climate change, but invariably, with the delegation of hundreds from China, we entered in this conversation, and then the competitive conversation, and the incentives to dominate from a geopolitical perspective, not just the free enterprise perspective. Where are we in that perspective, or from that frame, from your perspective?
Specifically, first of all, we were supposed to ask you questions. I'm dying to hear your answer to that.
I'm taking advantage. I got the mic.
So I am curious what you think about how California can lead. Look, this is very messy technology, not because it's bad, it's because it's powerful. It's very horizontal. Is a tool, like Jennifer said, that can empower people, but it's also a tool that can harm people. So we are in this very historical moment that there are many forces and tension pulling, and not most of them don't come from bad intention, but they do come from different interests and all that. So my question to you is, as the leader of California State, I finally got my question in, that how do we stay, as we historically have been, innovative, leading, but also lead in both technology as well as societal concern?
Well, and I appreciate that. Doesn't get you off answering my question, but no, I think it's sort of platform thinking in that perspective, and creating an environment where success becomes irresistible, becomes inevitable. And it goes to the issue of human capital. It goes to a formula. A lot of us talk about formula for success. Tom Friedman writes about from a national prism, this notion of the formula for success. We've had a formula for success in terms of a conveyor belt for talent, our education system. Absolutely, the UC, CSUs, the privates, as well as the community colleges, which I always appreciate. That's always an applause line, community college. And so that's foundational, and that's part of the secret sauce, pushing out the boundaries, discoveries, and partnerships as it relates to research and development, and maintaining that status. Also maintaining the status of being open and inclusive in the context of getting first-round draft choices from around the rest of the world. We want people to come from all over the world for riches and new beginnings, and so we practice pluralism. And that means creating an inviting and inclusive culture where 3-letter words like DEI are not fighting words. That we believe in inclusivity, we believe in equity, we believe in opportunity, and we want folks from around the globe to feel seen and heard. And that's why the state, I think, is dominated for decades, because we're a majority minority state. 27% of the state is foreign born. We're a universal state. And that state of mind is well understood around the rest of the globe. People come from all over the world to try to understand that secret sauce, but it's foundational in that respect, that diversity being such a profound strength. Creating rules for risk-taking, but not recklessness, and that's frankly bringing me back a little bit to the question and where we are. And I say that, mindful of the conference I was just at as it relates to climate. The world we invented in many respects as it relates to climate solution is competing against us, but we invented it on the basis of our regulatory system. It was the policies that we set that created the conditions where someone like Elon Musk would come in and make big bets and make big investments in electric vehicles because of our vehicle emission standards and the sort of anchoring of consciousness and the consistency through administrations like Governor Davis and Brown and Schwarzenegger and my own that this state means business. And so I think in all of those areas and all that capacity lay somewhere in there an answer to the question. So for me, that's an economic development strategy. And I'll bring, obviously issues around infrastructure, which are foundational as well. And where by the way, just because I'm here with all of you and do have the mic, we just put up a new site, build.ca.gov, which lays out in detail all of the existing infrastructure programs in the state. It's a 10-year, $180 billion plan, of which over $40 billion is actively being invested in the state. It's without precedent in California history, and that's, again, part of that formula, ultimately, for success for California.
Can I follow up on the regulatory question that there is a very interesting bill going around in the state of California, and there's a lot of
My last
talks.
count, and there's a bunch of legislative leaders here. I'm looking just at the 4 or 5 I see, 20 bills just represented by these authors. So there are many bills.
Yes, there's an AI bill that's really particularly looking at regulating models of certain size, and there is also concerns about that bill hurting open source modeling as well as little tech compared to it might potentially protect the big tech coming from public sector, coming from little tech. Don't forget, we have big companies, but we also have the world's best startup environment as well. What is your take on, keeping our innovative leadership versus this kind of regulatory efforts?
Well, I'm generally very mindful of the incumbency protection. That mars innovation and entrepreneurialism. And so I'm by definition, as a value proposition, sensitive to that. I'm intimately aware of one particular piece of legislation you're referring to and will not, by any stretch of the imagination, indulge further in that, since it's a work in progress. And I'm not going to make that mistake. I've made it many times prior. But
it's not a trick question.
No, but this is important. But it goes back to you guys. I mean, look, it's just so interesting to me. And you talked, Dr. Lee, about just 2 years ago. And we could talk about what happened from your perspective 2 years ago that maybe triggered a deeper consciousness for all of us around this thing that's been out there forever. I mean, AI's in everything. This GenAI thing, all of a sudden now we're just like, what's going on in that space? But when you have the inventors of this technology, the godmothers and fathers, saying, help, you need to regulate us. That's a very different environment. When they're rushing to educate people, and they're basically saying, we don't know really what we've done, but you got to do something about it. That's an interesting environment. And I think I'll just end on this and then put it back to both of you. Our challenge is self-evident. I'm just being as transparent as possible. We dominate in this space, as you said. I want to continue to dominate in this space. I don't want to cede this space to other states or other countries. I mean, this is California. 35 of the 50 top market cap AI companies are just right here in our own backyard. So if we over-regulate, if we overindulge, if we chase a shiny object, we could put ourselves in a perilous position. At the same time, we have an obligation to lead because the world, again, we invented. And so where do you land in all of this?
So I have a strong opinion on this. I come from UC Berkeley, which is one of the homes of open source. I believe that keeping things open allows, so having open models, having models which communities can use, which communities can train on their own data, modifying the weights to solve the particular problems of their communities, really empowers us if we do that with humans in the loop. And I believe if we do it with humans not in the loop, it's not going to be effective anyway. But if we're doing it with humans in the loop, then we will be able to see the problems as they arise. And I come from, I was 23 years at Microsoft. I love Microsoft, but if we just leave it to a few big companies, we find that their GenAI does really weird and unexpected things. And I believe that if we were all using it in our communities, if we had educated people through the community college system to be able to create their own GenAIs to solve their own problems in their communities, we would be testing it a lot more. We would be testing it with real people in real situations. So I also believe that's actually the way to make it safer. We will have a lot more people working on it, and the incentives then are much clearer, because the incentives are for communities to empower their own and solve their own problems and put their members on the side of being beneficiaries of GenAI instead of disenfranchised by GenAI.
Yeah, I agree with Jennifer. I think that history has shown us over and over again open models and open source software have played a critical role in the ecosystem of growth. I do agree that you're right, that those of us who have had a history in technology, especially AI, woke up and see how powerful this technology is and agree with the responsibility we have collectively as a society in certain areas. We do need to talk about regulation, especially I think when rubber meets the road, the vertical areas, whether it's healthcare, finance, transportation, environment, many aspects of our life and work, when AI is becoming one of the driving forces, it is important to subject this newer technology to the regulatory framework that we already have. I do think, just double-clicking on what Jennifer said, we have to be a little careful when we are putting newer regulatory framework on the model itself when it's still in development, when we need the kind of innovation. I'll give you an example. My young colleagues just joke, if they want the number of flops to control models, I'll just do 2 giant matrix multiplication. Just make it, 9 million by 9 million, whatever number you want. And then you can regulate by matrix multiplication. That's kind of a joke to show that this...
I went to Santa Clara, not Stanford.
Yeah.
Figure that out one later. Sorry.
It is, sorry for the nerdy example. It just shows that there is unintended consequences, and there are ways of either getting around this regulatory measure or proving it's not totally nuanced enough. So we have to be a little careful with that.
So let me go back to the question, because just interesting, because this. I think personally the most important bilateral relationship in our lifetime is going to be defined with our engagement with China. That's my humble opinion on a multitude of issues. And obviously climate change, I discussed a moment ago, but AI, it seems, and this arms race for dominance in that, and I was with you with President Biden, yes, when we had a round table.
You hosted President Biden.
We hosted him a few months ago. We were just in the process of putting out our executive order, which has 7 key principles, including, by the way, sandbox, to begin the iteration process so that we can start socializing on these key issues like traffic management, language access, issues related to healthcare. The next iterations, we have 5 now that are actively being advanced, 3 additional ones very shortly, including on the vexing issue of homelessness, which has some promise that we hope to promote. But in the context of where the president is, where this country is, with your understanding globally where other nations are. Give me the over-under on your concerns, areas of particular interest, areas of optimism.
My biggest concern or interest is America's leadership. And when we were in the room with President Biden, we discussed this topic. I think this technology is so critical for our economy, for our society, for our future, that we need to ensure America, especially as a liberal democracy country, we have leadership. And one of the biggest thing I think we can do to invest into the future is to adapt a moonshot mentality for public sector AI. So when we say public sector, this involves universities, colleges, involves nonprofits, involves government. And the truth is, public sectors are one of the driving forces of this country's innovation. If you look at GPS, internet, biotech, including early AI breakthroughs, they come from public sector. Public sector produces public goods. Jennifer already said one of the #1 public good is our workforce and our students of the future. And the second public good is the kind of curiosity-driven knowledge that can eventually translate into commercializable, products and applications. And the third reason for public good is that public sector helps all of us to understand, communicate, and evaluate what this technology is about. So right now there is a real gap between public sector AI and private sector AI, and that gap is not healthy for a country's leadership. So we should adapt a moonshot mindset. Like the NAIR bill, that National AI Research Resource bill that we have been advocating. And it reminds me California playing a huge role. When I was a graduate student in Southern California, down in Pasadena, it was the time that the stem cell bill was passed, right? It was an incredible investment in public sector and in curiosity and driven research, and California has been leading. So I think in this greater context of the globe, America's leadership in AI is really important.
I would definitely agree with that. I also think that we need, if we are going to do public sector applications, we're not going to build them on proprietary frameworks. We have information in many of our agencies. And that information, if we can train an open source, open model, if we can rejigger the weights in that model with all the information we have in the agencies in the state of California, we can build incredible models for verticals in biomedicine and health, in climate and sustainability, in equitable and fair distribution and more efficient distribution of public resources. So I see being open and going for a state or federal moonshot to do this as absolutely essential. And, you asked about incentives, okay? You as governor, we as members of a civil society have an incentive to improve these verticals for the public good. I'm not sure what the incentives are for the companies. So I think California should lead here.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, this is all familiar territory. I mean, it seems like a decade ago we were putting out, when I was mayor of San Francisco, open data executive orders and talking about putting everything again. I mean, it just releasing in a machine-readable ways, all these things. I think the Obama administration advanced a lot of those same principles, but we're not even close to where it doesn't seem like we made a hell of a lot of progress in this space. And that's a whole nother conversation in terms of of the open data space. But what about, where are you implied, and maybe I'll get some clarity, where are you on the open source side of this ledger?
I am on the open source side.
You are.
I am strongly on the open source side. It is with open source platforms that we have put our curriculum on platforms that enable us to, we're working. In fact, we have money from the state to partner with the community colleges in this. I also believe that in government, we can have moonshots where we take open source models and we train them to achieve some of these goals in all the different sectors of public service. So I am strongly on the open source side with a lot of sandboxing and testing as we're doing it to, and also, as we heard in the last panel, we should be, as we build these models, we should be working with the workers who are actually going to be using it and the citizens who are actually going to be recipients of that. And in so doing, we will be testing it. So, so I believe that the solution to a lot of the risks is putting it out there, building things as communities, and testing the heck out of it as we're doing so.
Yeah, totally agree. I think open source is truly one of the greatest fertilizers for innovation, and we have to recognize this moment. There's so much resources locked in a small number of big tech companies. Open source is the way to push innovation forward, is the way to democratize this technology, to democratize the education of this technology. And there are many ways to do it responsibly, but not having it will be detrimental to the progress.
Ultimately. So let's talk about the progress you referenced just 2 years ago. What was there a tipping point for you in terms of the GenAI conversation? You said you were surprised, and as someone who's been a practitioner in the space for decades, arguably, what occurred 2 years ago from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we were not surprised. I was not surprised by we reached this point, because as the models are progressing, as this field was rapidly progressing, as a practitioner, it is inevitable. We know that how generalizable and powerful these models will be. But the speed of progress is surprising, as well as just the way that ChatGPT has torn open the market. Now suddenly, it used to be Silicon Valley talks about AI, but suddenly, my grandma will be talking about AI. So that level of reach to our society really was a inflection point. And within this inflection point, what's most interesting is actually the policy world. It is absolutely because of this GenAI tipping point, suddenly we see the interest of the policy world from Brussels to DC to Sacramento. I know you're at the forefront. We were talking about this years ago. Before COVID, you had a whole commission of future of work. But the sweeping interest of AI from the policy world is,
So I agree. We all knew this was going to happen. I mean, having been at Microsoft 23 years, we knew that something like this was going to happen, but we didn't know whether it was 2 years away or 20 years away. It's a matter of scale, and when we were going to reach the right scale wasn't clear. It was going to happen at some point. I think many of us in AI thought it was going to happen further in the future than it did. For me, I had a personal tipping point in using ChatGPT and some of the LLMs. We were doing work on climate change. We were asking, can we drive technological solutions to climate change? There's a great class of materials called MOFs and COFs, invented by a wonderful chemist, Omar Yagi. These materials are incredible. They pull carbon dioxide out of the air. They're painted in, chimneys, to capture flue gases and pull the carbon dioxide out. it takes about 2 to 3 years for a graduate student to synthesize one of these materials when someone conceives of it. And we were working with Omar, and some of the students started using LLMs, and we started using them. I mean, we were doing more of the basic science, the fun. We took it from 2 years down to 2 weeks. It's a factor of 50. And, you know, it was visceral in a way that it hadn't been with all the intellectual stuff I knew. And I think different people in different domains have experienced this. I don't think of it as this external thing that's going to take over. I actually think of it as our collective intelligence and stupidity. It's all there, you know, but it is our collective. I think of it more as we are all of a sudden able to tap into a collective with the memory and the processing power of that collective. But I think it's us, and we have to learn how to work with it so that, though climate change is accelerating, we can accelerate more. Though, you know, we're developing problems in human health like the onset of pandemics, we can go faster. We are coming upon crises, many of which are of our own making, and we should have done things before. And I think AI, which is really us, our collective intelligence and stupidity, we have to harness the intelligence part of that to accelerate our solutions.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. It was a big part of the climate conversation. By the way, just interesting, just reinforcing the framework on technology. Just so you know, we do a 5-year plan through the Air Resources Board. It's updated every 5 years as it relates to what our climate strategy is and how we implement the goals, the audacious goals we set. In 2017, it wasn't that long ago, we didn't even consider, there was no consideration of large-scale batteries in terms of the state's future as it relates to our low-carbon green growth. I say that to make this point. Today's the 53rd day in a row that the 5th largest economy in the world is running 100% on carbon-free electricity. 100% electricity, 53 days. But which is just remarkable to think about that in and of itself. Primarily driven by addressing the biggest challenge with wind and solar, and that's the duck curve through large-scale batteries, of which we now have over 10,000 megawatts. So this notion of materials and pushing out the boundaries of discovery and taking something from 2 years, 10 years, to 2 weeks to 10 months is extraordinary and gives me deep optimism about so many of the challenging problems. But what doesn't give me optimism, and it goes to the notion of collective intelligence, your frame, is watching congressional hearings. And I don't mean to take cheap shots, but where folks think 5G is still a parking space, the cloud's still in the sky, and LinkedIn's a prison. Apps are things you fill out to get into Berkeley. And I say that to only make the point, you know, our regulatory framework has to sort of catch up to this reality. And I keep going back to this because I think it's probably the most anxiety-inducing thing for a lot of you out there is, we don't want to screw this up, but we don't want it to screw us up. And trying to find that right balance. I mean, the reason I did an executive order, it's not an indictment, but trying to find consensus with 120 people is hard enough. And we're talking about 20 plus bills and, trying to find consensus just on one bill and clean up that language. In Congress, in the United States, good luck. That's why the EO came from the Biden administration, not a legislative package. Now I know Schumer and others, we have different strategies. But just give me your lay of the land on that, and how we sort of can land the plane with the immediacy that you suggest. That this genie's out of the bottle, and the exponentials on top of exponentials. This is not the traditional linear curve here. This is something completely different. How the hell do we stay on top of this?
Well, so actually you do bring up a point of, I have also done congressional hearings. Now I wonder what you think of the ones I did.
And I'm being purposely unfair. Forgive me. Yeah.
it is so important that we do collaborate with policymakers, including the ones in across the country in Washington, D.C. Look, this is a multi-stakeholder problem to solve. We are only one stakeholder. Stanford HAI, one of our founding principle is policy outreach. This is very different from the traditional Silicon Valley mindset, but we recognized 5 years ago that this technology is too important. We gotta create that communication channel with our policymakers. So we created congressional boot camp. We created fellowships to send technology students to the White House, to the Congress, to Senate, to federal agencies. We have we collaborate with Hoover Institute on policy briefs and continuously create that channel. I think as educators, as public sector, members of public sector, it is our responsibility. I think that is gradually making a difference. We are also paying close attention to certain bills, not all of the bills. For example, the Create AI Act. Right now, that's in both Senate and Congress and bipartisan sponsored. That is one step towards this moonshot mentality. It's really building the infrastructure of this country's compute and data resource for public sector. But I don't know if this answer is satisfying, Governor, but at least as one of the members of the public sector, I feel like these efforts really make a difference. And personally, I think that so many of you at this joint summit have that kind of platform, the voice and the expertise, and I think it's so important that we all participate in this moment and try to push towards these kind of important policy work and communication.
I agree with all of that. Yes. Why don't we?
Thank you.
I agree with all of that, and what I would like to see is that every member of our Assembly and Senate, every member of Congress have an AI person who is with them. I think that we as a country need to produce the AI experts who can really work alongside our legislators, who can cut through the lobbying, who can cut through a lot of the misinformation and really understand what is best for their constituents, what is best for the country overall. I think it's really important that we make sure that it's best for everybody's constituents, because that's how Congress people vote. They vote for their constituents. And I believe if we do this right, if we set up this moonshot, but if we focus on problems that we solve in our own communities, in our own states, that may be a way to shift some of the, I'm not a politician. You are the greatest politician. But in my, in my view, that would be a step towards doing this, to bring that moonshot home for every elected official, to know that they can bring it home to their constituents.
And they can hire Berkeley and Stanford graduates when.
And community college grads.
Wait. We need to ask you a question.
I have one more sort of dystopia question, because I met with some fancy folks yesterday, and one of them came up to me. I won't say who, but you would know them. And they said their biggest fear is this will be the last free and fair election of their lifetime. That they're that concerned about deepfakes. And by the way, I've got personal reasons to believe that that's legit. The voice, the videos, these AI bots, the persuasion campaigns, not just outside agitators and actors, but just our own domestic polarization. And is that person being hyperbolic? Am I overstating that concern, or are we understating it?
I believe it is possible that this could be the last free and fair election. I hope not. The deep fakes are for real. They are very compelling. They can say things to you about your loved ones, they can just, however, I also believe that one of the reasons we're in this situation is because a lot of people have been disenfranchised in this country. A lot of people have been left on the wrong side of the digital divide. And I believe that education, GenAI is so powerful. We can work with different sectors. We can work with communities to empower people so that they can create and they can be the beneficiaries. And I think that until we bring opportunities to people, we are going to be at, we're going to be the victims of misinformation.
Yeah, I do think that the threat to democracy is a real one, and that election, this 2024 election, is a real one to watch. In fact, the Russian invasion to Ukraine is already the first information war, right? We've got a lot of disinformation and misinformation coming from that war, and I think this is going to exacerbate. The way to race against this, I agree with Jennifer, public education is a huge, huge piece of that. We really have to do a much better job collectively in educating our public. We have to do a better job in lifting the public in this moment of technology progress. We cannot be content with this digital divide and knowledge divide that is exacerbating our society. And we also have to really do some introspection. Part of the cause of all this is this, we haven't really done a good job of social media. And then adding AI on top of that is really a little bit of a double whammy in terms of dis and misinformation. And we have to wake up and recognize that this is our collective responsibility. And maybe 2024 is going to be a defining year in terms of how we view the technology's relationship with democracy.
All right, neither of you calm me with your answers, but let me just, I want to just circle back, and I'm very mindful of the time. I want to go back just this notion, I mean, you talked about the polarization, people feeling this sense of social isolation, lack of belonging, social media impacting some of that, obviously, the micro cults that we're all struggling through and the doom loops that we tend to be on 24/7, and the impacts that are shaping our society today. But back to workforce and displacement. I mean, in the old adage, anything gets, repeated gets replaced. Everybody, all these young folks, I appreciate you said a lot of them are coming in because they want to do public service, social service, solve for ignorance, poverty, and disease. A lot of them just want to make a load of money. The mic didn't go out there. And are just racing, to be the next Sam Altman or something. But the concern for that average person, even if they're well educated about the prospects, is that Scarlett Johansson calling me? I don't know. As educated as I might be, I don't know. I mean, is my eyes wide open to be cautious or concerned about that? So that's one concern. But the concern about jobs and displacement in the short run, I mean, we talk about workforce training. I mean, we're in the black and white movie days in 2024 on effective workforce training programs. As good and efficient and effective as the community colleges are, and, how good, Khan Academy maybe, or what, fill in the blank. If we're talking about the kind of displacement some of you are talking about and the speed of that displacement, how the hell do we prepare for that? Or again, are we just preparing for a worst case scenario that's unlikely to occur in the short run?
So AI, especially Gen AI's relationship with jobs, we're already seeing it in software engineering and a lot of different sectors, is actually a complex one. Just a few months ago that my colleague leading the Stanford Digital Economy Lab has put out a research study that shows that Gen AI actually augments the productivity of contact center workers. But then if you go into the different tiers of these workers, it actually helps novice workers more to improve their job quality, but it doesn't really improve the job quality of expert or seasoned workers. So how do we use this technology to, how does that impact jobs? Our friends James Manika and his McKinsey colleagues back in 2017 had this report that jobs are a collection of tasks. And for every given job, it's dozens and sometimes hundreds of tasks. Think about a nurse. I work in healthcare a lot with AI. There's so much opportunity to actually help our workers alleviate the kind of draining and overly exhausting tasks and give them back more agency, or give them back time in the case of a nurse, right? Over spending too much time charting or spending too much time fetching medicines when they could spend more time in the patient rooms. This is a way to say that exactly how AI impacts jobs is subject to a lot of just analysis, research, forecasting, and good policy. And it's not black and white at all. There is jobs that can be augmented, but there is gonna be also impacts to certain types of jobs. So humanity as a civilization has gone through this over and over again. And we have seen the pain, sometimes leading all the way to wars and conflicts, but we have come out. Everybody benefited from the coming out? Not necessarily. So we do, Silicon Valley likes to say, we're gonna see increase of productivity. But increased productivity doesn't automatically translate to collective prosperity. So what we really have to think about is, in this process of increased productivity, how do we ensure that the distribution of prosperity is fair, equitable, and responsible?
I was really moved by some things that were said in the last panel about developing the use of GenAI with the workers in those segments of the workforce. And I think if we can do that, we will really be able to help in a lot of jobs. Yes, there will be people who are displaced. The cool thing about GenAI, I mean, I knew zero chemistry, okay, and we're doing all these things with these new materials. I was working with a chemist, but, it is our collective intelligence, and if people can bring that to bear on what you do day by day, the set of tasks that are in your job, it's really surprising what kinds of breakthroughs you can make. And also the business about helping novices, of course, because they help you to learn the other stages much more quickly. And I think that will also help us in retraining people whose jobs are really made obsolete by this. And by the way, those are probably going to be white-collar workers and not blue-collar workers from what we're seeing.
Well, I appreciate it, and what I'm seeing are a lot of remarkable people that took the time to be here, and I'm grateful to all of you, and grateful for this opportunity. This was a sort of an inaugural idea that came from executive order. This is one of the 7 things that came out of that executive order around training, around human-centered framework in terms of workflows, and around the sandbox and the iteration that we call an RFI or RF2 framework, where it's not ready, fire, aim, but it's not your traditional procurement. Just leave it at that. And we're trying to blow up the entire procurement strategy in this state. And when you're a state that's larger than 21 state populations combined, and you're a state of such profound innovation and entrepreneurialism, we think that could resonate and have impact. But look, what also resonates to me, again, is this notion of humility and grace. Humility in the face of what we don't know, and having a flexible mindset. And having an ethical framework in the work we're doing. And I do want to just express from my perch of observation that there is something that does feel different in this context, that there seems to be a different level of sincerity from some of the innovators and entrepreneurs and the leaders in this space to truly partnership and develop a strategy and a framework moving forward that gives me more optimism than, frankly, I would have otherwise imagined. And the optimism that was not shaped, it's frankly pessimism on the basis of what's happened in the last few decades as it relates to social media. And I'll be candid with you, as someone that's passionate about this space. California's trying to lead, but we continue to be, pushed back by companies that are suing us and slowing down progress. I've got kids, and there's a breaking point here. So truth and trust in this space is, the proverbial coin of the realm. And it's important, but it's having an abundant mindset in that respect or a scarcity mindset to be determined. So what we try to do here is try to engage in an open, with an openness and a sense of purpose and mission. California, again, I just want to leave you. We want to dominate this. I'm too competitive to suggest otherwise. I love this state. I remind all of you, for all those, folks focusing on what's wrong. By the way, what's wrong and what's right is out there in abundance. Whatever you focus on, you'll find more of. But this is a special and remarkable state. And I do think the world looks to us in many respects to lead in this space. And so we feel a deep sense of responsibility to get this right and to work with you to advance this collective cause. So to all of you that participated, all of you are engaged, we look forward to continuing this two-way conversation for some time. And we're grateful to our two remarkable panelists and your insight and partnership with the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.